Hello, everybody. It's the Point Forward 5, or as I like to call it, the Doomcast. Milwaukee Bucks chatter, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Things have not gone well at all for the Milwaukee Bucks through 4 games. They are 1-3. They have lost 2 games to 2 very bad teams in the Chicago Bulls and the Brooklyn Nets. Jim Owczarski is here to either tell us that in fact, sirens should be going off, or, we should chill a little bit. I think that's where he's going to lean. That's not where I lean, as everyone knows. But Jim, just point blank right off the bat, what is going on? The Bucks lost 2 extremely winnable games. Their first game, the win against Philly, came with Philadelphia missing their 2 best players. It doesn't feel like anything has gone right to start 1-3. So what is the issue, would you say?
I mean, look, if you start 1-4, the issues are multiple. You mentioned bad losses at home to the Bulls and on the road to Brooklyn. Younger teams, the Bulls probably a little older than Brooklyn with more top end talent. The Nets clearly rebuilding. Both teams should be in the lottery this year. And looking back, JR, these are going to be the games I think you're like, look at those losses back in October when they're fighting for seeding in a crowded East. Look, I mean, the offense has looked disjointed. Maybe the idea of waiting for Khris was not the best plan, even if that was somewhat hyperbolic in the early going by Doc Rivers and some of the players. Either A, they really thought Khris was going to play in the preseason, or whatever. I mean, so I think we've seen some issues on offense there. Defense is sort of the same stuff we've seen, the last year, JR, with, these guys, frankly, it's known the Bucks don't like to run back on defense. This includes Giannis. To obviously Brook takes a little bit more time to get down there, and teams know if you get the ball, get out and run. And so we've seen that, especially against these younger teams. We've seen better defensive efforts in whole, JR, against Philly, against Boston. They had leads against the Celtics. Invariably, they just sort of ran out of gas, and Peyton Pritchard hit a bunch of threes. But they were in that game, right? And had every chance to have a chance to win late. But yeah, the games against Chicago and Brooklyn, JR, to me were, I don't know if they thought they could just roll the ball out and win. No, you got to put a little more effort. Like, it's just, they're not that dominant. And I think that's really what came back to bite them those 2 games.
Yeah, and Doc Rivers, like we've said before, has used the word dominate. That's what his standard is in some of these cases. So going into the year with those words on his lips, it felt like, okay, they want to get back to being a Bucks team that just really can roll the ball out and beat those teams. And I don't think, Khris Middleton, if you wanted to tell me the difference between this team and having a playoff run is Khris Middleton, I believe that completely. But I don't believe Khris Middleton is the difference between winning in the regular season or not against lesser competition. To me, that feels like a major red flag. Like, this cannot be all about Khris Middleton. I wonder if we underestimate defensively what he brings to the table. Again, like you said, some of the same things we've seen: corner threes for days in general against guys like Kobe White is a good player. What he did against the Bucks, he hasn't been doing against other teams. Like, that's nonsense that he was able to just reign supreme. So to the Middleton question, do you have any sense of when he might be back? And is it really, like, is he really the big problem that they have right now?
So we'll get a better sense as we record this, JR. They're going to get a practice in Boston. I think it's a big deal if he can be cleared to practice 5-on-5 or feel comfortable enough, whatever the hang up is that has prevented that. If he can do that, my guess then, JR, is get to Memphis, see how he feels and reacts, hold him out in Memphis, and then, he'd be ready to go for the home and home against Cleveland. I think that's best case scenario. But again, it's Khris trying to come back, and this team has only shown that they will slow roll that for whatever time it takes. So that's that. Now, in terms of your other question, though, I think to a degree it is that simple, because he's still the third all-star on the team. He's still a $30 million player. He's still the guy who almost dragged them to a first-round playoff win without Dame and Giannis, with 4 double-doubles and on 2 broken ankles. Like, he's not the two-way player he was during the championship season or 6 years ago, okay? He's still 6'8" and can rebound. You know what I mean? So, like, he's not going to fix the transition defense per se, because, again, he's not a fast guy that's going to run back. But Chris's 6 to 8 rebounds a game doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot, right? When you think about it over the course of a season. So, they are older, and so they need the top to be playing the games. Now, to your point, no, they should have still beaten Chicago and Brooklyn. They could have, they should have. That's on the group that played. That was a team effort, 1 through 10. And so hopefully they've learned something from that. But quite honestly, JR, you look at their schedule going forward, there aren't those sort of like roll it out games. I mean, it's the Cavs and Memphis. And you, I don't know. I mean, if you don't find something, 1-6 is feasible. And while that's not the end of the world, that's now you got to win 5 in a row just to get back to 500. So, I think this next week is pretty important.
Yeah, even against the Celtics, as far as rebounding goes, you can handle when their starting 5 is really good. When you're losing the rebound battle to Jordan Walsh, a player that I definitely heard of before that game, that's soul-searching time, isn't it? I mean, I don't want to say that. I never talk about effort. I always feel like that's overblown. But it just blows my mind. I mean, Giannis is still getting points. Damian Lillard looks okay. He looks good. Defense will always be a question mark with him, but like he is giving you what they want from him. These guys, the big two, certainly you could point to small things, but they're doing okay. Nobody.
Look,
I don't know.
I will say this. Look, they're not infallible. Giannis is just as guilty as everybody else for not running back on defense.
He did have 7 turnovers too against Boston. That was rough.
Right. And Dame is not infallible. He is just as guilty for not fighting over screens against the Nets. And yet we saw him do it in Philly, and we saw him doing it against Boston. And now I asked him sort of about his place, his role on defense, and he had said, against the Celtics, he picked up defensively a little bit sooner in the backcourt, and that may help him or help protect him a little bit. Maybe if there's a strength to Damian Lillard, it's that as a one-on-one player, maybe even defensively, it allows him to not sort of get exposed to a degree. And Giannis needs to rebound. Like if we go to Chicago and Brooklyn, JR, he's just as guilty as standing around, right, and not chasing stuff down. So the Stars, here's the thing: they're still, to your point, good enough to get 30 when they want to look great. But this team needs them to do that all the time. They're requiring a little more effort from both of those guys in all facets of their game. And, we've seen it already. It was just the 2 games. Look, JR, this Boston game feels a lot better if they would have just handled business against the bad teams and they're 3-1. And you're like, oh, second game of a back-to-back in Boston.
Totally
no Khris. Yeah, they like fourth quarter, they finally stretched it out. Like everyone's like, oh, what? Right? So like in context, the game against the Celtics was probably their best of the 4. It's just that they wet the bed against these 2 really bad teams. And that's us on them. I mean, I know Doc's going to catch a bunch of crap because Doc does. But to me, that was a player issue against those teams. It starts with the 2 best guys. And now they've got a little bit of a hole to dig out against, with a pretty tough schedule the next couple of weeks.
What do you make of Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton? Because it's starting to feel like Bobby in particular, because Connaughton, I think, is a little further down the bench where you kind of take what you can get from him. I I don't know if Bobby Portis is meant for this team fully. I don't even know how to describe it, but it just seems like there's something missing there. How would you describe those guys?
We'll go back to front with Pat first. Pat Connaughton has played under 18 minutes a game already. If Khris is available, Pat Connaughton's probably playing 15 minutes,
maybe
13 minutes. Like Pat's not.
No, I agree.
The issue here, like, I mean, it would be good if on even smaller sample sizes of threes, that shot comes back. Like, we haven't seen that yet. I think DeLon Wright, to a degree, JR has been disappointing. He's only playing about a dozen minutes a game. I realize maybe Doc's trying to figure out where he fits and for whom. Because he's not a pure point. He's not a pure shoot. He's a combo guard. Has his defense, I think, has been okay. But when you're on the court 12 minutes, it's kind of hard to, and look, he I want to say allowed, but Peyton Pritchard hit a buzzer-beating 3 at the end of the third quarter in Boston because he was able to get to a spot that the coaches didn't want him to get to, and DeLon Wright was the defender there. So I think that's an overblown thing, JR. I mean, Taurean Prince is playing 31 minutes a game as a starter. As a backup, he'll be down to 25, 20, right? So Pat's that. Look, you got a guy hurt. Pat's your 9th, 10th man. Bobby, I don't know if this is a Boston thing for Bobby, but like he's 51% from the floor. The 3-point shot that was so hot in the preseason, he was so good, has not translated to the regular season. So that's unfortunate. If he can step into that, 1 double-double already. But yeah, he's in that same boat, JR. He had a double-double a couple days ago, but he's has to rebound. And he acknowledged that after the Boston. He's like, I did not play a good game. I need to rebound as well. Defensively, I think we know what Bobby is. He's been here long enough. Like he is out there to provide a scoring punch, and it feels worse when his shot isn't going in. I think Boston's a bad matchup for Bobby. I think we can kind of say that. Tatum he's bigger than Jason Tatum, but Tatum is not, that's not a good matchup for Bobby. So I think that is what it is. But I think, he was part. I mean, look, your 8-9 guys, those were collective efforts to lose to Boston, to Brooklyn and Chicago. And he was part of that. So, going forward, I think it's a better fit against Cleveland, probably a better fit against Memphis. But he's a guy who needs to score to really show his value on this team. And so that's what we'll have to see, as this gets going here.
One of the things that annoys Bucks fans on a bigger picture is when national commentators try to find a match for Giannis Antetokounmpo in the trade market or in the free agency or whatever mechanism they imagine is going to get Giannis off of the Bucks. And I think there's some fairness to feeling that way. I do think it happens with other guys in other markets more than we think, particularly the small markets where, where they play isn't seen as an endpoint. Philadelphia, New York might be seen more, Boston might be seen as more of like a career endpoint for a lot of guys. So the Bucks have never had the best player in the NBA the way that they had for a while with Giannis. And the last time they did, that was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he did leave. So I could see why there is frustration for Milwaukee fans. With that in mind, though, is there anything different about this year? Whether it's Giannis being perhaps more open to moving on, or the emphasis on how bad the Bucks have been in these first 4 games coming from a national perspective, is there anything different about this discourse, or is this just the same old thing? National guys just trying to find a way to divorce the Bucks from Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as it stands, it's sort of the same old thing. He is in the first year of a new contract extension.
I know, man.
So it's sort of, I believe his 3rd contract extension that will take him into year 14 by the time of his player option with Milwaukee. So I think it's a little bit of the same old. And in fact, look, Giannis, JR, we have written this a bunch at JSON.com. I think we do a good job as the local outlet to contextualize the Giannis stuff. And when he gets close to the end of an extension or an end of a contract, he'll talk to someone in the summer. And what will he say? Well, as long as the team keeps winning, then I want to stay. And if not, maybe somewhere else. That is the thing he has said since his first $100 million deal. And then when he signs an extension, what he says is, well, as long as they want me here, it's a business, like he literally says the same two things. It just kind of depends on when, right? But in the NBA media culture, for lack of a better phrase, that is always deemed as things need to be monitored. Well, now the monitoring is done because the Knicks don't have anything to monitor. no picks, no players. So I think now the teams are dreaming of Giannis. So I think that is what it is. Look, he's still one of the top 3 players, if not top 2 players in basketball, JR. So until that changes, I think it'll always be there, right? I don't know why Nikola Jokic doesn't quite get that. I think it's probably because Joker doesn't entertain anything or anybody. So he doesn't say anything that could be interpreted one way or the other. Obviously, Steph is, look, I guess Steph here recently said, well, I want to stay, but we know it's tough. And then they gave him $60 million. So, I think it's the same. As long as he's there and Milwaukee underachieves, it's going to be a fair point. But again, look, I've got a piece out of jsonline.com from Wes Edens talking about not just this team, but even going forward, JR. And even with Dame and Giannis on max deals, this team is going to have a lot of flexibility to retool itself around them. Now, the intent is he's as the owner of the team says, we have Dame and Giannis to start with. So it doesn't sound like the Bucks are gonna move on from him, right? In any near time. So I think, look, last night I asked Giannis about taking a step forward against Boston. He said, yeah, we played but we need to win. It's not good enough. I want to win games. I don't think that's an edict or a threat, but it is the NBA culture. So I think it's just the nature of things, the way they are. I think even if he were to stomp his feet and say different, I think it wouldn't change. All he can do is continue to sign extensions, which he's done. And, the other stuff is just always going to be there.
Yeah. My head, Jim, to wrap this up, my head knows that 4 games is not a big sample, not enough to determine whether or not. Do I think the Bucks are still a playoff team? Yes, I do. Even I do. I don't. But I look at last year where I think there were some pretty early rumblings about Adrian Griffin and how this wasn't working, and they were winning at the time. And I think those proved to be correct. I would have thought if there was ever a time for the Bucks to really be playing excellent basketball, showing that they have taken a step forward under Doc Rivers and with the personnel they have, it would have been in the first few games of the season where they had a couple easy wins on the schedule. They had an early Boston game and, Philly out of the gate. I thought they were going to hit the ground running, and maybe they run out of gas shortly thereafter, but they were going to really show something. This has adjusted I'm not going to lie to you and say it hasn't changed how I see this team. I think this team is not a surefire stay out of the play-in game team. I think they are probably still a top 6 team in the East, but I no longer feel confident in that like I did at the beginning of the year, where I would have said, hopefully they're better than just 4th. But now I don't know if they're 6th. Obviously, I am a pessimist psycho, but has anything changed for you? Do you feel differently about this team 4 games into the season?
Yeah, I do. So there are 2 things there. There is a different feel to this than under Adrian. Because, if we remember last year, there was bad losses at the very beginning, right? They were blown out. They were blown out by Atlanta at home. Mm-hmm. They were blown out in Toronto against teams that were bad and they should win, right?
Mm-hmm. Same thing,
right? They go to, the Boston game. was a little later. They had ripped off like 5 in a row before they lost by 3 in Boston. Yep. Right. And so to your point, they were winning. But it was a struggle. It is different. It feels different. It sounds different. Just comparing the locker rooms, comparing the coach, the way they speak about Doc, the way they speak about what they're trying to do and get to. It's, so I do think it's different in that way. The playoff stuff, like, look, I get it. And I shouldn't be so dismissive of the odds makers, JR, because they make their billions for a reason. National pundits had, the Bucks kind of like a middling East team, sort of falling behind the Knicks and Cavs. Cleveland is playing very well. I think they won the title as a 3 seed. I think 3 to 4 seed at this point, JR, is not like the worst thing because you're starting at home. You can still get a home court game series down the line. Are they a 5-6? I think that's a little I think it was an early wake-up call to me. That will have to be proven out, though, right? Like, it's easy for me to say they know what they did wrong against Chicago and Brooklyn. Now we'll just have to see. And Boston is clearly the champs. They're better. I think that's fine to say. These Cleveland games coming up, this Memphis game coming up, like what level are you at, right? And, again, a 1-6 start, 6 straight losses. Yeah, guys are going to get antsy. Guys are going to get itchy and maybe say some things. And that's a hole to climb out of. But, they go 2-1, hey, okay. 2 wins in 3 games against some good, like, solid playoff teams who have, like, real thoughts of getting to conference finals in their respective, like, that's okay. So, yeah, we'll see, JR. But I don't think it's, as it was we record this, I don't think they're at that level. They're not like a bottom of the East team. But again, they've got to play to prove it otherwise.
He is Jim Owczarski. He'll be there in Memphis as the Bucks take on the Grizzlies on Thursday night. Bucks are back home November 2nd. That's Saturday against Cleveland, as he mentioned. Thank you, Jim. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Yep, sounds good.